I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. Hello, everyone. I am coming to you with some field notes from week 1 of this year-long experiment that I'm doing. I promise you there aren't any ta-das, I've figured this out. If anything, it's quite the opposite. But I am learning some really incredible things so far and having some rude awakenings. So if you're confused about what I'm talking about, you might check out the most recent episode where I explain this year-long experiment that I'm doing alongside AI to really see if I can prove my hypothesis true, which is I believe when we integrate AI into our lives intentionally, we can not just become more productive, but truly become more human and increase our quality of life. So that's what I'm hoping to set out to prove or disprove one way or the other. And how I'm doing this is really looking at a few big categories of life, looking at time, health, wealth, and passion, meaning relationships with people and personal passions. And I'm tracking as much as possible quantitatively and qualitatively. So you can do a double click into all of this and watch the recent episode where I'm interviewed about this if you want more context. But it has been an interesting journey this last week. So I have a huge spreadsheet, as you can imagine. Some of the data is coming in through API, like the Oura Ring API and other just automated metrics that I'm getting, sleep, even time spent, looking at screen time and where that time is being spent on the screen, social media versus email. I'm looking at health metrics. I'm looking at biometrics. And then there's a lot of qualitative data that I am feeding the database and AI daily. This includes psychological, emotional, feelings and all of the squishy, squirmy, subjective qualitative data that is really important. And this is not a biohacking, quantified self type of experiment. Many people are doing that, and that's amazing. A component of it are those metrics, but it really is more, I'm calling it quantified soul. The why behind this was really that I was noticing out in the field as I'm out speaking and meeting with different people across all categories in all regions of the world at all levels, and just seeing this consistent boredom and burnout feeling in their eyes. And I've never seen that level of exhaustion before in my career. Well, I realized I was starting to feel it myself too. And just like this sense of aliveness and vitality and zest for life, it wasn't quite there in a way that I know I'm capable of. And, life is great. It wasn't that there was a huge deficit in one area. It was just, I know it can be better. So can we increase our quality of life when we start to really analyze and track all of these things? So that's part of my scientist hat on. And part of this episode today will be me switching gears and putting my guinea pig, subject matter hat on, because I am literally in the petri dish right now. And this is long game. At least, we've got a year and we're week 1 and the ahas are coming in fast and the curveballs. So I'm going to put my guinea pig hat on for a moment and tell you, day 1, I was just in for a rude awakening. I'm thinking in my perfectionist performance way, okay, I want to make sure I can tell a great narrative and get these statistics exactly how I would want them. And I'm using air quotes, try and make it as perfect as possible and as neat and organized. And, here it is, New Year's Eve. I'm out with friends and we're up late. No, I was not drinking, but yes, I was consuming plenty of salt and sodium. And I was up late. And my Oura Ring, I couldn't get it off because my fingers were so puffy that I couldn't charge it. So right out of the gate, I don't even have my sleep data. And I'm just thinking here on New Year's Day, I've failed, right? Oh, and I just kind of go down that. And so I'm also feeding AI and primarily ChatGPT for those who have asked, what do you mean when you say AI? ChatGPT now has a couple of years of data on me personally and professionally, and they're taking that into account with everything I feed them about this experiment, all the other data. So this is all in context of what they know about me and my personality and psyche and also my career. So I'm like already kind of complaining with my daily journal updates. I have criteria every single day. I'm usually recording via voice into AI these prompts, and they're the same exact every day. I can tell you what those are, but there's plenty of them, and I have them memorized. So I usually am wearing my wrecking vest, and I'm just doing my daily entries. And I'm like, geez, I already feel like I've kind of failed. And one thing that was pointed out to me from AI was that, a wobble is not drama, it's data. So all of this information is so important to be observing. And if I try to manipulate it and tell a good story per se, I'm definitely, that's not the point of this exercise. And I'm not doing myself any service whatsoever, let alone you. So we need to be real and transparent about what's happening because this is real life, right? This is not me trying to just reach a certain health goal or, run X amount of miles every day. It's much more of the whole picture. So that was a big okay, I'm going to have to change my operating system around this because what's worked in the past and what's gotten me here is not going to get me to proving or disproving this hypothesis. So that was a real okay. So I carry on and, been very consistent as long as my devices are charged and able to collect the data. And also I'm doing the manual data. And I've noticed, some things myself, but what I did after day 7 was, upload all of the spreadsheet data and the qualitative data, which is inside of the spreadsheet as well, and say, okay, here you go, AI, what can you tell me? And I didn't know how deep it was going to get. I didn't know how, customized and literal things were going to start to feel. But I can share with you some of the things that I got back. Okay, so stick with me here. And then also I do promise to kind of rattle off the metrics that I'm looking at and measuring because I know a lot of you have asked, what specifically are you measuring and how? And I'll share with you a couple of the software tools and platforms that I'm using to connect my spreadsheet with the API with also the qualitative information. It's actually pretty simple, and AI taught me how to do it. But here's some of the, the things that I'm getting back after a week of data. And again, this is navigational. I'm not trying to generalize any of this. This is all exploratory, and telling and sharing this as it's happening is unique because usually you do a study, you get all your results, you analyze it, and then you develop a pretty report. And this is actually very messy and the opposite. So you're diving into this petri dish with me, and I am very publicly unfinished. So one of the things is I gave AI the directive, and I do it almost daily. I don't want any bias. I don't want you telling me what you think I might want to hear. If anything, I am looking for pressure testing things. I'm looking for blind spots, and don't give me any BS, basically. And it really is a way that I try to combat what they call, I think the term is called sycophancy, where based on your prompts, AI can start to kind of tell you what you want to hear if it knows that you're leading it. It's kind of like leading the witness. And we want to make sure it stays as objective as possible, in this case for me. I'm not looking for a cheerleader here, although it is supportive, but it is very real. I'm looking for solutions, and I'm looking for feedback and function. So it did say, I sense that you're wanting to tell the story and the narrative versus observe, right? So that's very me. I'm a storyteller. So I thought that was insightful. It says literally, key honesty line. There were moments where you wanted to narrate what was happening instead of just observing it. And that to me feels but where's my control, right? I need to have that voice and that influence and persuasion over the story. And that's not the point. Right now, especially, we're needing to observe. Another thing is that a pattern, and it said, emotional friction, narrative urge, relief after externalization. So what does that mean? So AI, especially ChatGPT, and asking it, it can't really read the inflection of my tone yet, audibly, but it can read the tone of your words being used and how you are speaking, because it's translating everything I'm saying, and that's going back into the data set. But it said when an emotional load rises, I have a strong impulse to explain or add structure or document it. And when I do that out loud in writing or to AI, there's a noticeable emotional settling. And so their interpretation, the working theory, would be that my nervous system seems to regulate through sense making, not suppression. So the act of naming what's happening, especially to a neutral, non-rigorous mirror, aka AI, reduces internal noise for me. Now, you might think to yourself, well, that's obvious. Thank you, Captain Obvious. But for me, I felt that without even kind of realizing what was happening, is just by saying and admitting and calling myself out and saying, hey, I don't even have the first full day of Oura Ring data in my API because it wasn't charged and I failed and And it's like, just getting that out and then having AI say, hey, that's a wobble, that's data, that's not drama. We're looking for that information too. That's valuable. Versus if you try to be perfect, that's not the point of this experiment. So why this matters, according to AI, was this suggests journaling and AI reflection isn't just for insight generating for me, it's regulatory. That's not true for everyone. So I'm researching and looking at past studies of AI and psychology, and one point was made by this scientist that Benjamin Franklin used to journal everything and also write down goals and how he was feeling, and it was just all data. And I've been journaling since I was quite young, fairly consistently. I have boxes and boxes and boxes of old journals. And, one thought is, what if I were to scan all of that and digitize it and throw it into AI to see what it could make of it? But another key takeaway was relationship tension correlates more with cognitive load than conflict. Okay, so what's the pattern? So moments I flag that there's something relationally heavy going on into my life, I tend to cluster around things like logistics and kids and future uncertainty and, things that feel like that emotional load when it also feels cognitively heavy. That is more pressure to me than any kind of emotional hiccup or what you would consider a huge emotional curveball. So it's starting to notice that I weight that heavier than what might feel like a big healthy tension conversation or, and so the interpretation was the stressor isn't disagreement, it's anticipatory responsibility for me. And my system reacts more strongly to, oh gosh, this might be added to my cognitive load or my plate or my emotional load in the future versus the emotional discord itself. So I thought that was interesting. A few other things, like physical symptoms appearing during periods of stressed pace, not overexertion. So, there were days where I went on longer runs. And one thing that AI is showing me too is there's usually a lag in when I might feel a lower sleep score night or the impact and the benefit of a great long run or even the cold plunge. But the pattern is that I've had this numbness in my arm and my shoulder and I'm on it. I'm talking and getting my, resources and things figured out about it. But I consciously slow a bit when I know I have those types of moments or I'm holding back action and resisting the old push instincts, which is great. That means I'm learning. But it's not that the pattern is, peak physical output equals slowing or needing longer to recover. I don't know if that makes sense. But so basically, why this matters is because if the experiment is for me to rewire the way I'm operating, some physical symptoms may be like system migration costs, not like health decline. So that reframes how urgently I might, or calmly I might intervene. There's this is so early. These are not ta-das and ahas. This is just me giving you an idea of how this is not just my heart rate variability, tracking. It's really this qualitative journal entry side of things that's giving AI more different types of data. One's very instrumental or instrument type. These are black and white data points and metrics like screen time and like heartbeat or beats per minute or how many steps I took or, sleep indicators. Those are pretty black and white, hard to argue. You could, but within a margin of error, and they're pretty automatic. And then what we have on the other side are these warm, squishy, mood and recency of events happening to the time that I did my journal entry. And one of my prompts every single day is 10 active gratitude touch points. So I'm recalling 10 things that happened within the last 24 hours that I'm specifically grateful for. So things like, I'm grateful for my health. That doesn't count. It's not that I'm not grateful. It's just getting very specific of, I'm grateful for Lincoln turning around and giving me a hug before he walked back, or he walked to school, or walked into the school for first grade. Or I'm grateful for something very specific. There's a road runner in our neighborhood, and we all on the street consider it kind of our wild pet. And the other day, I'm out working on some writing and doing some stuff for the experiment outside, and this road runner was there, and it was playing, and it just is amazing how much gratitude I had for it. So like, there it goes on the list. So I have all of those, and that's like, it reminds me of early days social media when I was coming up with formulas for trying to measure sentiment and engagement and impact and influence. And I had those metrics, and some of the software was still developing, but you could start to see and have this data, but it was warm data. It was hard to nail down, and it was kind of mushy and fluffy. But then I had the cold metrics following, reach, frequency, and, those media metrics that we know, these are black and white, these are cold, these are what people are spending against. It's the gathering of that information of both data sets and both types of metrics and putting them together and trying to arrive at a new way to navigate or arrive at a way to measure the value. That's what we're trying to do here. So that's kind of one of the takeaways is like what I ask AI and what it asks me back. We're constantly working on this together of what are we not looking at? Some of the other takeaways were, hey, the way you're measuring this, I'd like for you to shift it up so I can read it better. And then also AI saying, I think you're going too deep into this type of qualitative data. Or I need some event indicators of, did you have a healthy tension conversation that day? And literally categories of, what type of day was it? Was it more of a recovery day? Was it a deep work? How much deep work went into that day? So it's telling me, how to get better because we're still figuring out what we want, what we need to record and what is valuable as we're going. So this is, extremely day by day dynamic, but also it's messy, right? There's not a hardcore protocol other than consistency. And that is the thing I'm learning, the constant in touch with AI and being in lockstep with how we're doing this and how we might want to shift it. And then the consistency of reporting is key for pattern observations. Okay, so I can tell you a couple of other things. I thought this was interesting. So when I, think of outliers or anomalies in data sets, oftentimes we dismiss them or we just don't give them a lot of weight because we don't want them to skew the data, the big group, like the big volume of data that we have. However, something that AI is saying to me is like, yeah, we want to look at, the outliers and anomalies a little differently in what they can indicate relative to patterns that may not be convenient, but they're interesting. So we're not going to overweight them, but they are very important. Because in some cases, I'm wanting to excuse certain feelings or, I don't want certain feelings to erase data or overwrite it. But those anomalies and outliers might be the thing that help us track back and reverse engineer these pattern detections or things I want to prevent or things I want to be proactively trying to initiate. So those are actually really important. And from like a scientist perspective, we might think the opposite in a more traditional type of study. I was pressure testing AI and I was like, I'm a party of one. And yes, I'm having a couple of other people close to me who are interested start tracking some of these similar things, which will be great. But the response back was, you are yes, and one. This is a sample size of one. However, it is a lot of data every day. And so that's what I would like to get into next with you and just share, okay, what are you tracking and how are you tracking it? Because that has been a key question. Okay, so I do have a massive Google sheet that's backed up with a variety of tabs. And the first one, I'm looking at the categories: health, wealth, or time, health, wealth, and passion. So passion includes people, relationships, and personal passions. And so really trying to get down just the table stakes, like making sure I'm getting the bare necessities down first of sleep, how time is being spent. And when I say sleep, I don't just mean like sleep score. I mean, when did I go to bed? What time did I wake up? When did I get in bed? How long did it take me to go to sleep? What's my REM? What's my deep sleep? What's my restfulness? Like looking at all of that. And then looking at time spent on screens, both computer as well as my iPhone device, where that time is being spent. One of my goals and one of my allergies is being on my computer just mindlessly in my inbox or doing things that don't light me up. Like it just drains me. And the last couple of years, I've spent deleting, delegating, divesting time in those types of activities that cause more just unnecessary communication flow back and forth. And so I've done a great job at that, and my calendar looks massively differently. But what I do know is that sitting down at that computer can be triggering to me if I feel like I'm just going to be answering emails and ping-ponging communication for hours or an hour or however long. I've noticed, and this is like one of my key takeaways, and I've had people around me that love me tell me this, is that I can't wait to go sit down at my computer lately the last week. And this has been for a few weeks now, because I did start a little early just to kind of test to see if I could even record these types of things. But I can't wait to get back into it, look at the data, work with AI, read, learn, start to just stretch my mind of what else could we be looking at. Like, for example, I'm starting to look at hormones too, like my HRT. I'm looking at things like how many days, I think today might have been the first time I put makeup on in the first 7 days, like just time spent in different ways. And it's even sunlight, and I'm just constantly wondering, what else could I be adding? So I'm doing all of these core metrics, recording these, my steps, my fitness routines, cold plunge, which I'm getting one. I've used one, but now I am actually going to be integrating that and have a little setup in my garage. Same with sauna. If anybody has advice on what they've loved, feel free. I'm in that research mode right now. Feel free to tell me. And so, there are a lot of metrics. These are all what I call kind of black and white. Then I'm getting into even my daily journaling. So the protocol for that is, number one, this is all from Elizabeth Gilbert. I started this nearly a year ago, is journaling. The first thing I journal is, what would you have me know today? And this is more of that kind of spiritual side of my higher power giving me the advice, giving me the rundown of what do I need to know. And a lot of times, like I said, I'm rucking and I'm just voice recording into AI and it's transcribing it back to me, and then recapping too. And this goes back into the data set of what I believe my higher power would be telling me about today. Like if I were to reach deep into that soul, what should I know? Like what are my marching orders for today? So that's my first prompt. My second is 10 active touch points of gratitude. These are quick. I fire them off. I don't overthink it. And as I'm going out through the day, I'm making note of like, oh, that was a moment, like the Roadrunner or Lincoln, coming out after I put him down the other night and coming out and giving me a hug and saying, I love you, just randomly. I'm like, oh, like totally active gratitude. Or it could be, I just made the most amazing salad, or Ryan just made me eggs this morning and I wasn't expecting it, or put coffee on my bedside table. Like those are active gratitude things. And some of them are huge, like a family member got results back and they were benign. So it ranges. Okay. Then the next journal point is gratitude touch point, an outreach to someone. And so this is reaching out to someone and telling them what I'm grateful for or that I'm thinking about them. And it can be distributed in a variety of different ways. This could be through a voice note. It could be a phone call, a text, a video, whatever it may be. And that's been super fun. And this is all of who's popping into mind, right? This is not manipulative. There's no list, but it's a natural, oh, I haven't checked in with that person. This week, I ended up having a conversation with a friend that I've known for 15 years now that I hadn't talked to in a couple of years. And because she saw the podcast, we ended up getting on the call. She reached out. And already I'm just noticing like, what we put out is energy, it's currency, and we're going to get back that kind of cycle. Okay, what's the next touch point? It is proof of presence. So this is part of that spiritual bucket for me. And that to me, as more of a, I think of myself as, I love metrics, I love data, I like science, I like black and white, I like pragmatic thinking. But I also am extremely spiritual. So the mix to me is, I've been doing this for years, but I have a note in my phone just called proof of presence. Proof of presence that there's something bigger than me and there's higher power. And so I will just quickly rattle off anything that happened over the last 24 hours that was proof to me there's something bigger than me. And then I've added one. I'll tell you about that in a moment. But usually the last journal entry is just, how am I feeling in general? Life, personal, professional, mom, hat, relationships, just emotionally. And then what I added day 3 of this week was a question prompt about fear. And this came from someone who's on my personal board of directors for the experiment. His name is Trennan, and he really is, he's kind of a fear guru when it comes to like physical, like fear, meaning former Olympian, and he's the head coach of the Canadian half pipe or freestyle ski team. And so he does a lot when it comes to training athletes of all types, surfers, and, snow sports, so on and so forth, about aerial awareness. And he knows fear, physical fear, and spatial kind of awareness and fear relation. And so sometimes he's guiding me on not just the psychological or emotional feelings type of fear of what might be happening in my life, but how to look at it in relation to what he's learned about physical, like concern for safety fear. And he asked me to add what fear am I leaning into? What am I pushing into? Meaning in a healthy, good way that I'm proactively seeking. And what is scaring me about that? And what is the value of it? And so I've added that prompt, which has been really interesting because right after gratitude and proof of presence, I'm going into fear. And so he will see the report like every other person on my personal board of directors for the experiment each month, and we'll talk it through, and we can make shifts to that. So one other area of data that I haven't talked about yet, but this is really interesting. In that passion bucket, I have data touch points or metrics line items in the spreadsheet for quality time with Lincoln. We do a gratitude boomerang almost daily. We've been doing reading parties. Like quality time as in, I consider this as not parenting ops, but parenting active engagement. And we all know what that feels like. If you're a parent, like there's filling out forms for school or keeping your kid alive and fed and all the things that go along with helping make sure that the human is optimized and running as efficiently and healthily as possible. And then there's the time, spent practicing riding his bike this weekend. So I'm tracking that. And then same from a relationship standpoint, in my relationship, personal, romantic relationship, we do weekly update meetings. These are weekly check-ins, and we have protocol. The AI has helped us figure out and format, arrive at over the course of time, and specific questions. And I have that recorded. This is all consent, there's an agreement. Everybody knows it's being recorded. And we record that as an audio note. I transcribe it and give it to AI to analyze. And also that's data that's going into the big data set. So that's interesting too, because that's impacting all of the other stuff. And we'll see what happens over the course of time as that, tends to gain in volume and dynamically change. So the net, I think one of the big things for me this week was, I have a big write-up here that I actually spoke into AI, and then I asked it, do you agree with this? And this was cooling down after a run yesterday. I realized how much this reminds me of very early days social media, when I realized, we have to find a new way to measure this as media, professionals and marketers. We have new types of metrics and components and value that can't be measured the old way. So what's the new industry standard? How are we going to do this? And my core thesis was that when we can start to mix it and longitudinally over time, we can see correlation of, let's say in that case, it was the impact of revenue along with reach frequency and sentiment and engagement. I knew there was a connection. If we take our reach and frequency, our cold metrics, and we add our warm metrics and, feeling, emotion, predictive analysis about behavior, and we marry that together, we're likely going to arrive at something that will indicate an up or down of revenue or up or down of conversion. Well, similar here is my thesis. And so I just rattle off, this is what I said, and I had it translate. And I said, okay, do you agree with this, that we could look at this experiment in a similar way and arrive at potentially a formula or calculus or method or something that can help become a quotient for quality of life when we look at these cold metrics with these warm metrics and our vitality, right? And that zest, that aliveness. And in short answer, it said, yeah, I agree with your core thesis. Long answer, you're circling something important and it gets sharper as you name a few things more precisely. But what it did say was, what you're doing in this experiment is essentially replaying that methodology, but the argument is at a level of the human body and psyche, not just does this platform work like we would do, more in social, but does this life configuration work? And so, that's a legitimate continuation, not really a stretch at all. And the distinction between those, I'm going to call them hard, black and white metrics versus the soft, warm, more squishy metrics, is where the deep truth lies. And so it's not just about being objective or being subjective. It's the instrumented and the interpreted data, looking at it together. And both are real, and both can be noisy, both can be misleading. One wears a lab coat, right? And that's we have this, automated number from an API, it's coming from an instrument or a wearable versus feelings. And it said, okay, the one critique is real and also partially irrelevant. And so this is where I said, I'm a party of one. How valid is this experiment? And it reminded me that it makes it more exploratory rather than generalizing and trying to, say, oh, I figured all of this out. Like, we're not going to arrive at that at the end of this. We're going to arrive more hopefully at a navigation system. So yeah, this is more intensive, like longitudinal self-study than more of a population of science. So the value comes from volume and consistency and transparency, not scale. The key for me is that AI is helping me build this study and construct it in a way that's useful as we go versus just analyzing what I give it. And so that collaboration already is unique to me because it's not just a tool that's analyzing data. It's a thought partner that's helping me decide what's important to collect and decide how to analyze it and read it so we can have better insights toward the hypothesis. If there's anything I would say, I'm just excited because I love to play in the unknown areas, and I haven't felt this alive about my career or just life in quite some time. And if that's the net at the end of the day, I'm happy if we can keep this going. I'd love your feedback. I'd love your thoughts. And back to the protocol of platforms I'm using. So Google Sheets with make.com, which is an AI automation tool, and it syncs the data with the Oura Ring or Google or financial platform, whatever. So many, you can get an API from so many different apps, wearables, platforms. And so we're basically just using those hoses, and make.com threads it into a spreadsheet so it's updated automatically. I don't have to manually do those ones, which is super handy because there is a lot of data entry, even qualitatively. Okay, so questions, thoughts, feedback, please hit me up. Social, email, amy@amyjo.com. If you want to subscribe to e-newsletters, which is where people hear about the updates first and the field notes first, it's amyjomartin.com. You can go sign up there, and we shall continue forward. So thank you for following.